I'm George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and coasttocoastam.com. Become a Coast Insider for ad-free access to thousands of shows you'll really enjoy. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. In this hour, we're going to take your phone calls with Marshall Masters about Planet X. We'll be doing that in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. Marshall Masters with us. Marshall, how did you get started in this in the first place? What happened?
Oh, you just walk backwards into it. There's no degree program in college for Planet X. I was just trying to figure out global warming. And so this was back in 1999, and I got together with a couple other folks in Mensa, and the three of us put our heads together, and we started researching it, and we were curious, was something similar happening to the other planets in our system? And when we looked at anything that had an atmosphere, it was showing evidence of the same things. And so we found it indirectly that way, and it was like, is this a natural cycle of the sun? We couldn't determine that, so it had to be an interloper. Then the next question is the interloper a rogue? Is it passing through the system, or is it in a captive orbit? And so we went through the whole process, step by step, of breaking it down and finding what explained everything. And it does. It all goes back to it. And, the thing is that we did that. Other people have done that. There's a lot of suppression right now. Your listeners can go and get on Google, Yahoo, or Bing, type in Planet X or Nibiru, and just see how many screens you got to drill down before you see me or someone like Nancy Leader, who's incredibly prolific. And so they're controlling this conversation. People can't get the information. And this is what really, it pisses me off. It has pissed me off for a decade.
Radio. All right.
I'm sorry. And it's just, I understand what they're doing. If people are not vigilant, if they don't see what's coming, George, they're going to die in place, or shelter in place. Same difference. What do they want to do? Well, look at the Georgia Guidestones. It says keep the population under 500 million. Doesn't say how we get there. But this is how we get there. We're going to have this global catastrophe. And during this Planet X flyby, something amazing is going to happen. The shackles of slavery on our species, and we are a slave species, the shackles are going to come off. And we're going to be dying in vast numbers. 9 out of 10 are going to die. But they will die as free men and women. So my focus is on the survivors. And the big win, the end game, is defeating what the elites want to do, to reshackle us back into slavery, towards the worst of it. Earlier we talked about passing through the tail. Well, that's when we're at the end of that. That's when this is going to happen. That's when the seed vaults are going to open up. They're going to come up with food, medicine, clothes, construction materials. All you got to do is agree to their terms, which will include taking the RFID tags. And those tags, by the way,
the sign of the beast is coming.
They are. Because
prophecy
these things are operating at multiple frequencies. They're very robust. This is intelligence that I have from someone who blew the whistle. And these things are designed, they found the frequency by which we feel a cosmic relationship with Creator. You do feel a sense of the presence of God. Well, you get tagged with one of those chips, they're going to block that frequency. And then they're going to replace it with whatever they want God to be. That's how insidious this is. And they want a lot of people to die. So when I write my book, The Big Win, to me the big win is if we just called bluff, and that only takes three things: self-sufficiency knowledge, hope for the future, and knowing you're not alone. That's it. That's my whole bag right now.
And you know they want to reduce the population down to 500 million. That's the number we keep hearing.
Yes, because it makes sense, George. If you only have so many trinkets to go around, okay, and you have enough of a supply that it could be meaningful for people, if you have 7 billion people, a day or two? That's it. So who's going to sign their life away for a day or two? But if there's enough, all of a sudden, there's a lot to go around. And if you get in on this, okay, so people are going to make a bad deal. They're going to take the chip. They're going to sign away their rights. And the elites will reestablish slavery control. The big win is it's easy. It's easy. When they make the play, people say no. They pull a Gandhi. We're just not going to participate. No, thank you. They're going to understand it's not no to the carrot. It's going to be no to the stick. And it doesn't need to be the majority of the survivors. It only took 30% of the colonists here in the United States to win the revolution. The other 70% either sat on the sidelines or played ball with the British. All we need is a critical mass, or in other words, the 100th monkey. So that's my whole bag right now. That's what I'm writing about. That's the information I'm trying to get out there. I don't know if I'm going to survive the tribulation, but I just know that when my day comes, I'm standing before my God, warts and all, we'll both know I kept the faith. And I'm just trying to give people a plan, an idea. I'm not talking to the 90% that are going to die. I'm sorry about that. I really am. I've lived with the burden of that misery, and it has been a terrible weight on my shoulders. Continues to be.
One last thing before we get into calls here, Marshall, and that is validation reporting, which has been so important to this. You used to do that. You don't anymore. Why not?
Because I would just be one small voice in a big chorus. So, great. Let the chorus go on without me. I can focus on what's really important. I'm trying to help the people who I know are going to be the most likely to survive. And it's not the one building $500,000 bunkers.
Well, that's true. All right, let's go to the phones. Thomas in La Jolla. That's in California. He's on the wild card line. Thomas, go ahead.
George, thank you for taking my call. And Marshall Masters, thank you for the research. This is a very sobering interview, to say the least. For many, many years, decades, in fact, there have been rumors that the planetary elites have been building deep underground militarized bases. By deep, I mean at least a mile underneath the surface, for planning for a flyby. And of course, a flyby would include kinetic impact of asteroids, meteors, collateral material, and also protection against massive electrical phenomena discharging between planet X and the surface of planet Earth, which would create, as George knows, electromagnetic pulse, which could possibly fry, the electronic circuits. My question is, there is some debate that a deep underground militarized base, at least a mile underneath the surface, may be the worst place to be during a flyby because of seismic effects. They may turn into deep underground tombs, so to speak. And I was wondering what your thoughts, your speculations, reflections on this. Would it be better to be on the surface or perhaps underground shallowly, or would the deep underground bases, are those the best places to be? And thank you again for the work that you're doing,
Thank you,
Dr.
Tom.
Masters, and thank you again, George.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Marshall.
Well, the deep underground military bases, Phil Schneider was the guy that blew the whistle on that. He's a hero.
The late
they
Phil
go down
Schneider.
2 miles deep. Pardon?
The late Phil Schneider.
Yeah, the late Phil Schneider. And, I had the privilege of watching all of his YouTube videos, which are a little harder to find these days. But these deep underground bases, and they have a network of them, they're interconnected. What I can tell you is they started this program several decades ago, and what they did not anticipate when they made their grand plan for these deep underground bases was sinkholes. This is something that is new. They didn't anticipate that, and it's very scary for them because you have a sinkhole opens up above or below one of these deep underground military bases. That's it. I don't care how sophisticated it is. It's going to collapse. It's going to be a problem. So I don't think the elites are going to do as well underground. I think that they're going to have a pretty high death ratio down there. In terms of the surface, I actually, in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I talk about shelters that can be built rapidly and are going to be strong enough. And in that, I'm talking about a layered sandwich of about 12 feet of dirt and 2 feet of basalt. And so the basalt has paramagnetic qualities, so it's a radiation shield. Now, 5 feet of dirt is going to give you EMP protection, such as an airburst nuclear event. But we figured more to about 12 to 15 feet, and the style of construction I put in there, and I actually focus on, there's a fellow by David South, Monolithic in Texas, and his system is utterly brilliant. It's perfect for this. These things can go up very rapidly, and so I see, when we see on CNN the talking heads telling us, yeah, everybody sees it, don't worry, it's just going to be an interesting light show. When you hear that, the last window of opportunity to do something has arrived. And if the next time you see them on CNN going, well, we didn't anticipate all of the things that happened, but we've corrected our models and don't worry, then the window of opportunity is closed.
It's gone, yeah.
So I tend to think of process. I'm not date-driven. So, what he's talking about with the deep underground bases, they're not going to do well, and I don't think they've anticipated all the things that are going to come into place, particularly with the lithosphere lock. And also, let's be honest, when we see private jets littering the tarmac at Denver International like a bad case of the measles, dying time is near.
Next up, we go to Vicki, first-time caller in Duluth, Minnesota. Hello, Vicki. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for answering my call.
Sure thing.
Can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
Okay. I want to go back to my question is, I am only a couple blocks from the big lake, Lake Superior. And, I can look down at the lake. I'm wondering when Marshall talked about the first wave hitting Europe, second wave hitting the East Coast, will that come up the St. Lawrence Seaway into the big lakes? Push all the water up?
There'll be some of that, but more importantly is when we have the pole shift event, that's when it's really going to be bad. So you don't want to be anywhere near those lakes. Usually what we're talking about is about 150 miles away. If you were going to northwest Minnesota, at the other side of Red Lake, up in that northwest corner, that's where I would head when things are getting bad. That's a good area, highly survivable. And there are other areas in the country like north of Asheville and North Carolina. So these are places you want to keep in mind, but where you're located right now, hard to say, how much of the water is going to come through the seaway, but definitely during the pole shift, not going to be a good thing.
Marshall, in your latest work, Survival, Wellness, Advocacy, and the Big Win, what is the big win?
The big win is we come out of this a free species and we have a Star Trek future.
With how many people?
Well, during the tribulation, it's going to be a period of about 10 years. The population will be whittled down pretty hard. But we're going to rebound. And I think by the end of the tribulation, while at the worst of it, we could be down to 500 million, by the end of it, after the last shaking and rattling and the earth trumpets and all of that, we'll have 1.5 to 2 billion.
Will the lifestyles of the people then be what it is now, or will they be back to the Stone Ages?
No, I don't think we're going backwards. I think we're going forwards. I have hope for the future. People are going to be free. I mean, George, this is going to be an exciting time. It's going to be painful, but on the other hand, it's going to be exciting. Think about all of the fantastic inventions we've heard about, the carburetors that give 100 miles to the gallon and things like that. And what happens? Some special interest sends the government goons down to shut the guy down, take all his research, make his life miserable. Well, what happens if there's nobody to stop our Nikola Teslas from popping up everywhere? And they will. One of the things I talk about is in the book is that we're going to see what I call an alternate. The infrastructure of the Internet's just going to be hammered. It's just not going to get back on its feet for a very long time. But people are going to find a way to communicate with what I call an alternate. Now, they're going to need equipment to do that. They can get old laptops working and things like that, but they're going to need a new way. It's a mesh network where, messages don't go into Google and then back out to somebody, but everything's passed along from one computer to the next. It's called a mesh network. And people think, well, great, I can't go to Costco and buy a mesh network modem today. You don't have to. We have millions of mesh network modems all over the country.
Hold on, Marshall. We're coming back for final calls in a moment. And welcome back to Coast, back with Marshall Masters, back with your calls. And Marshall, do I understand this right? You're making your new book available on Kindle and PDF ebook for free? Is that what I understand?
Yes, it's free, and you can download it from my site, knowledgemountain.org. I have a PDF, and you can just import the PDF into your Kindle reader. It looks nice, reads well, and so it's a nice universal format. And, earlier I was saying about the alternate, and people would be surprised where the enabling technology is going to come from for that to happen, because that's going to be a big freedom tool. We already have it, and when you read the book, it'll blow your mind, and you can get it for free. Just go to yowusa.com or knowledgemountain.org, download it, enjoy it. It'll give you hope for the future. The thing about it is the elites want you to think you're set up to fail, that we can't make it, all right? And it's all just, mind tricks. The fact is that all we have to do is three things: self-sufficiency, knowledge, hope for the future, and knowing we're not alone. And if we can do those three things, George, we got a Star Trek future. But if we let them trick us into thinking that they've got us over a barrel, then we go right back into slavery. And that's what I'm fighting against right now. That's it. That's my whole raison d'etre.
When you started talking about this, Marshall, what did your family think?
Well, we don't talk anymore. You know, that's the problem with this. Once
it's
your
not
eyes
easy.
open up to this, you don't have a lot of conversations. You know, there's one of the things that whistleblowers have told me over the years, and it's like to a man, to a woman, they always say the same thing. Now I know how Noah felt. You know?
Yeah.
You know, so you're telling people they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear bad news. So, but I know what I know. When you're in awareness, you know what you know. And, you know, I see a lot of people out there that are in awareness and, you know, they got denier spouses that make their lives miserable. You know, there's you stop doing this or I'm going to divorce you. They're always threatening the nuclear option. And it's a terrible thing, but once your eyes open up to this stuff, there is no going back.
Is this a United Nations effort here, Marshall, under the table? I mean, do all these countries know about it on this planet?
Yeah, and they're preparing in different ways. Look at Russia. They're building underground bunkers like crazy for their population. Sweden has enough for its entire native population. The Scandinavian countries are very good at it. The United States, they're buying coffins and bullets.
Not good. Let's go to Ken in Kingman, Arizona. Hey, Ken, go ahead, sir.
Oh, hi, George and Marshall. I feel like I met my brother. So much of what he's talked about tonight, exactly what's been going on for me the last 15 years. I do have a question. The USDA has been projecting a 9.0 earthquake in California, especially on the Cascadia. And do you have a timeline for that tied into your Planet X stuff? Because what I'm worried about is roving bands of refugees, and I've been reading a book lately called The Loss of Civility, How to Survive a Total Breakdown of Society, written by two spec operators, how to do it with your family, your friends, and your neighbors.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's one of the things that earthquakes, there's absolutely no way to predict with any certainty, but the pressure is building. Okay, so we're getting hit. The Earth is responding to the sun, which is responding to Planet X, and it's warming up on the inside. You know, what Edgar Casey was saying is actually right. He had the process right, but we just wound up on a different timeline, and things are playing differently. And the universe
and hence people think he was wrong, but you're saying he may have been right.
Correct. And I'm saying that he was right about the process. And that's the reason why I'm process-focused. I'm looking at how are the dominoes falling. I don't care how long it takes for the dominoes to fall. I just want to see how they're falling. And right now they're falling. And what this man is talking about, George, I can tell you here in Reno, this is one of those topics that people are in awareness, just dread. Because they're going, my God, what are we going to do when, 10 million Californians come streaming down interstate, coming down the interstate?
I think rush hour is bad now out there.
Oh, yeah. See, there's no rent control here. So the first thing that will happen is the refugees are going to pay 3 to 4 times a month rent for the same places. So we're going to see, because there's no rent control, we'll see crooked lawyers putting up billboards everywhere around town saying, we'll get them out, we'll get them out. And so native Reno folks are going to get kicked to the curb.
But you're saying whatever's going on with Planet X is happening now. Unlike some people who say it's coming, it's going to happen, you're saying things are happening now.
Absolutely. We're tracking all of the data. If you just, if your listeners just go to my website and watch my video, Signs number 13, and I show them the earthquake and the meteor activity since December 21, 2012. And interesting thing is we just got in the most current for December of last year. And it's still, the trends are still month over month. year over year, it's still increasing. So it's only a matter of time before we have a Chelyabinsk incident again, another super bolide. But George, what happens if we have a Chelyabinsk directly over Los Angeles, releasing 30 Hiroshima atomic bombs worth of energy?
You're talking about catastrophe beyond anything I could even imagine.
Yes. And that is exactly, and this is empirical data that we're tracking. We're not talking to ETs, and we're not speculating on, we're going simply with hard evidence you can take to the bank. And I present that in the video. I also present something for people that they can do to help protect themselves if they are in the vicinity of a Chelyabinsk event. And it's very, very simple. So, and I explain to them the terminology. It's real important. People, if you go and you start looking on the internet, what's the difference between a meteor, a meteorite, a fireball, a bolide, and all of that? It's like Harry Truman said about economists, lay them all end to end, they point in every direction. And so I took some of the mystery out of that so people could focus in on the real key terms they need to be mindful of. So if they do get reported, they know what to home in on.
Next up, we go to Eddie in El Paso, Texas. Eddie, it's your turn.
Well, thank you, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, you're very welcome.
And Mr. Masters, thank you for your hard work and your information that you're putting out there. Sir, I'd like to ask you, in regards to, you talked about all the calamities that were going to happen as far as pole shift, meteorites, so forth. Do you think, just two questions. First question is, do you think we would be safer underground shelters? And due to the fact, because, obviously we'll lose our power grid and everything, and we have to worry about our power plants melting down with radioactivity, among all that. But also on the North Pole and the South Pole, would it be, as far as intensity of these calamities, would it be less on the North Pole or South Pole? And I'll take my answer off the air, George. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. Go ahead, Marshall.
I think that in general, people just need to be able to have a plan B that's going to get them to a relative area of safety. Here's some guidelines I can give to somebody, just some rules of thumb. You want to be 150 miles away from any major body of water, Great Lakes, oceans. In terms of nuclear plants, we're going to have Fukushimas all across the country. If you think Fukushima is an atomic volcano and they can't turn it off, and it's killing the Pacific. But we're going to have that same problem here. So you got to look for your prevailing winds. So wherever you're going to locate yourself for your plan B, you want to be at least 50 miles upwind of a nuke plant and 100 miles downwind of it. Then the other things that you want to look for besides elevation, and you don't want to go too high because you want to be at an elevation where you can do farming. We're going to go back into an agrarian age, so stay under 5,000 feet. But what you want is soft soil, rolling hills, and lots of clean water. And I'm talking about deep, deep wells. That's really going to be important, especially when we have that last phase where we're passing through the tail of the Planet X system, because the iron, that dust that's going to fall everywhere, is going to just make surface water a nightmare. Now, eventually that'll clear out with the exception of swamps and sloughs and things, but during that period of time, you're going to need to have water. So those are the basic rules of thumb. In terms of construction, my advice is that you build above ground so you're not into a water table. You don't excavate. You build above ground next to a side of a hill, and then you backfill from the hill, and that's how you get your 10 or 12 feet of protection. But people are also going to find other ways to be safe. They're going to railroad tunnels, parking garages, folks are going to be innovative. The ones that I believe are going to be the best able to organize are going to be faith-based organizations. So that's the reason why my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, talks to faith-based leaders. And they're going to be the ones that are going to march to the beat of a different drummer. They're going to see a clear and present danger, and they're going to get their flocks to safety. These are the people you want to find. These are the people you want to work with. They're the ones that are going to be most capable of creating viable communities. And those are the general ideas that I'm throwing at it. As far as it goes for the people that have built these, expensive bunkers for $500,000, $1 million, they're going to be fine for a year or two. Then when they come up to the surface to forage, they're going to be strangers in a strange land, and predators will just take them out. They'll be hunting them. And so that's why I call them bunker bunnies. So, again, it's not about the having of things. It's the knowing of things. And that's what I'm trying to get across to people.
Let's go to Mike in Auburn, Washington now. Thanks for calling, Mike. Go ahead.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Good, Mike. Thank you.
And hello, Marshall.
Hello.
Well, I have a question for you. I believe earlier on you were talking about something was going to happen in February. Was that a comet or something like that, some kind of explosion? I forget what it was you were starting to say and then got sidetracked into something else. That's my first question.
What we're seeing for the first quarter of this year is a very, very high probability of a Chelyabinsk level event somewhere in the world. And the month of February, statistically, is when it's most likely to happen. Keep in mind that Chelyabinsk happened on February 15th, 2013. And on that very day, everybody was looking in the other direction because NASA was talking about another asteroid that turned out to be a non-event, and they were completely blindsided by Chelyabinsk.
Okay, and my second question is, if you were me and you lived in the Seattle area, where would you want to go when this stuff really starts to hit the fan? Where would you want to vacate to, and how would you really do it if you don't really have much money to relocate, buy property, that kind of stuff?
And not a lot of people do either.
Not a lot of people do. I would head east of Lake Roosevelt.
East
East of Lake Roosevelt.
How far east? As far as you could go.
As far as you can.
Yeah. Don't look back, right?
That's it. So it's a tough thing. I mean, it's hard for people. Relocating, it's why I call it busting a move, because you bust up your life. And, then you have your whole family that they think you're as crazy as a peach orchard boar. And it's difficult. So, the best thing to do is to have your bug out strategy. You want to be able to get out of Dodge in time to give yourself an advantage. So again, going back to when you see the talking heads on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, because they're propaganda channels, they're controlled by the elites. When you see them saying, "Oh yeah, we see it, everybody sees it, but it's just going to be an interesting light show. Don't worry about it." That is your bust of move day. That's it. When you hear that song and dance, you just do it. You just do it. And if your family thinks your family's going to think you're crazy and you're overreacting,
well, they probably will.
Yeah, they probably will. And you know what? Good buddy, you wouldn't be the first one, and the ones that I really, really, my heart goes out to, and that's the reason why survival wellness advocacy and the big win. You think about who do I want to help the most, and it's the people I've heard crying on the phone so many times. Grandparents who have children with minors and that are grandchildren, and they're trying to get their children just to look at stuff, and the kids are living in, ground zero areas like Los Angeles. And they're going, "Mom, you're crazy. We're staying here. Our life is here." And then these parents, these grandparents, they have a death wish scenario. Do they stay with their children and grandchildren so that they can die with them and comfort them? Or do they try and do something that they can provide a safe path out for their progeny? And that is a big reason why I wrote Survival Wellness Advocacy and The Big Win. I'm trying to help these people that I've heard crying on the phone so many times. And I mean, they cry. It's torment and agony.
Do you anticipate some kind of an asteroid or meteor situation soon?
I think this year, yeah. It's just when I look at the empirical data, but also look at all of the buzz we're hearing out of the government about they're discovering asteroids all of a sudden. They're out there pumping up the dialogue, and that's what I hear. There's a lot more chatter going on. They're talking about this in a more serious vein than I've heard in years. And so, it's, to say exactly when it's going to happen, who knows? But to me, it's an Amtrak proposition. Amtrak. They don't get there on time, but they eventually get there.
They sure do. Marshall, we are out of time. Keep in touch with us with your work, your incredible work about Planet X. When I come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM, we're going to have open lines. Just about anything goes, and Tom will be taking your tweets and your texts as well. Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.